Okay, guys. So the next method, we have factoring. What's the first thing? We already talked about that. She was eating. They got a whole little picnic back there. All right, so again, on your salmon colored paper, you have factoring. Does everything factor? No, it doesn't. All right, and then we did square root method. What's the limitation on square root method? It has to be missing the bx. So what happens when I have something that does not factor and it has a bx? You have to complete your square. Yeah, because look at this. If I would ask you to factor this, you'd be like, all right, parentheses, right? You'd be like, trying to set this up. You'd be like, all right, my parentheses, like the last one's negative, so one's plus, one's minus. Options for A, X and X. Options for C. Is that going to give you a 10? No, it is not going to give me a 10. So that does not factor. Does that mean you can't do it? No, of course not. Okay, so this process, I'm going to we'll talk through step by step here, is completing the square, and then we'll break it down for you. All right, so first thing, I want you to kind of look through what happened in this step. I moved the -1. In terms of A, B, and C, which one is the -1? The C. Okay, so the first thing they did was they moved the C value to the other side. Okay? So it's like X's, non-X's. Right? This is like the bulk of completing the square. Where did 25 come from? Well, first let's notice it's on both sides, right? Okay, it's on both sides. What type of number is 25? It's a perfect square. Okay, so where did it come from? What? You have a theory. She's honest. So is it fair to say it's your B value divided by 2, and then you multiply it by itself, or you square it? Yeah, and we'll break this down for you, but yeah, she's right. She's right. All right, take a look at this step. Adrian, can you let Christian in, please? So what happened here? They what? What did you just say, Hannah? Did you just say something? Oh, stop it. So I'm going to teach it to you. No, you'll be all right. Izzy? Say, I heard somebody say, what did you say? I factored it. Yeah, guys, if I asked you to factor this piece right here, right, you'd be like, all right, set up your parentheses. Last one's positive. My signs are the same, both plus. Options for A. Options for C. It'd have to be 5 and 5. And what do we know? If I have 2 of them written like this, I can write it as that. So what's the name of this whole process called? Completing the square. I went ahead and found a number that when I put there, I guarantee that it will factor so that I can write it as something squared. Yeah, the middle number is given to you. We had to come up with this number, right? So completing the square is you come up with a number that goes here so that when I factor this, I can factor it so they're both the same. Does this look like what we did yesterday? From this step on? It should. From this step on, they took the square root of both sides. So you get that to cancel. And then there's nothing else I can do with that. And then they got x by itself. So from here down, this was yesterday. So that's why we have to teach you square root method first. And I had to teach you factoring first because there's factoring in there. Now hold on, don't panic. You guys are all up in a tizzy today. I'm going to break this down for you. We're going to write it down step by step. Foolproof, okay? Foolproof. As long as you read your steps. Foolproof. I say that every year, then somebody's like, oh, I didn't get that. I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, you didn't do step 1. You've got to read your steps. Johnny?
So when you're given a problem like this,
you will always have a B value.
you'll always have a B value, even that B value always going to
And then you square it. Yeah, because if you square a number, you're guaranteeing that it's a perfect square.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm guaranteeing it. Yeah, no, but no. When you square a number, you make it a perfect square. That's part of the formula. Dividing by 2 and square it. You've made it perfect. Anytime you take the square root of something, your answer is plus minus. Because if I ask you what's the square root of 25? Well, because 5 times 5 is 25, right? But what's negative 5 times negative 5? It's positive. So that also works. So you have to include the plus and the minus so you account for both. This one we did because it's not perfect. And I couldn't do a factor tree.
So if it was perfect, we're just going way down to the square root.
Yes. Yep. All right. So don't be panicking on me. Let's break this down. Okay? So this is where you're going to want to grab your salmon sheet. Let's get the steps on there. Sandwich. We hungry? I don't have lunch till 1:30 today. I am going to be hungry. All right. So step 1, rewrite the equation in the form ax squared plus bx equals c. So in other words, that was that first step, right? It moved the c value to the other side. Yep, salmon colored paper. So you want to rewrite it so you have x's on one side, c's moved to the other. These salmon colored, any colored papers I give you, you can use on your exam. Not the test, the exam.
So we can write like little marks and stuff on it. You're allowed to.
Yeah, don't write little extra notes on there unless they are approved by me first. Otherwise, yeah, you won't be able to use it. All right, so step 1, we're just moving the c value, which is exactly what we did in that example. Step 2, divide. This is a step you didn't see in that example, and we're going to actually focus on step 2 on Monday. Divide each term in the equation by a. We don't want there to be an a value, because then it messes up my factoring, and it doesn't work. Okay, so you divide everything by a. Again, we'll focus on that step on Monday. Step 3, it's the part that Sam came up with. Right? It's your b value. We divide it by 2, and then we square it. B divided by 2, and square it. That's a period. It's the end of the sentence. All right. Afterwards, what did they do with that 25? They added it to both sides. Why do you have to do both sides? Yeah, it's got to be balanced, right? It's got to be even. If I buy a present for my one child, I should probably buy a present for the other ones, right? Got to keep it balanced. Yeah, but what's going to happen if I don't? They can. Well, that's fine, because then it's equal, right? They're sharing it together. But if I'm like, here's this glorious present just because I love you, and nothing for you, it's going to be an awful night in my household. It's gonna be terrible. That's therapy. Sometimes they deserve it. All right, so we add it to both sides. That is our magical process, right? That allows it to be a perfect square. So you will factor the perfect square trinomial. So you may want to throw a parentheses squared on there, because that's how it'll factor, right? They'll be exactly the same, so I can write it as parentheses squared. And then solve the equation. So then it's, after you do that part of it, then it's just like what we learned yesterday. It's the same method. And don't we already know how to factor? Simultaneously, pretty much, yeah. Well, some of the stuff we did yesterday we don't do today. Yeah. Donnie. Mm-hmm. Yep, it's always how they finish. Yeah, so them two methods are kind of intertwined. Now, square root method had to be missing the bx, right? If a big part of my problem is to take my b value and divide it by 2, what must I have? I must have a bx. Yeah, so on your salmon colored paper, like underneath square root, we wrote must be missing the bx. Underneath completing the square, must have a bx. So could I ever solve the same problem using both methods? No, because it either has a bx or it doesn't, so it's one or the other. All right, so we're going to baby step this process, okay? I am just looking at the step of calculate b divided by 2 squared. right, figure out what that is, and then how does it factor. Okay, I'm not doing the whole process, we're just kind of doing a baby step. All right, so what's my b value on number 1? Bx, so yeah, there you go. So it's 4, and then we divide it by 2, which is 2, and then we square it, 4. So 4 is what you would add to both sides of the equation to keep it balanced. Okay? So let's practice then, how does it factor? Right, some of you can see it and just know, right? My last one's positive. Is that last one always going to be positive? Yep, sure is. Add that to both sides. So yeah, it's always going to be positive, which means my signs are always the same, which makes sense. If I'm going to write parenthesis, parenthesis, they better have the same sign in them. And then, so I look at this sign then, so I know they're both plus. Options for A, x and x. And then options for C, we know it's got to be 2 and 2. So I would write it as x plus 2 squared. Now, I'm going to do a couple with you, and then I want you to notice a little pattern that's happening, okay? So number 2, what is my b value? Negative 10 divided by 2 squared is 25. Now, since I know I'm always adding the number onto the end, and what happens if I square a negative? It becomes a positive. Does the fact that this is negative 10, does this really matter? No. And you'll notice as I go through, I don't even include that because I know it's going to be a positive because I'm going to square it at the end anyway, which is going to turn it into a positive. All right, so how does this factor? All right, and again, so it would be last one's positive, so they're the same. They're both minus. Options for A. And that's going to have to be 5 and 5. So x minus 5 squared. Okay, let's do number 3. What's your b value? The fact that it's negative? Don't care. 16 divided by 2? 8 squared. So 64 is what you're adding to both sides. We okay with that? I know, again, I'm only working on a teensy little piece of this puzzle. So then how does this factor? X and x, what are your signs? So it'd be x minus 8 squared.
So basically, when we have that answer, it's just a square root. If that number is going to be square root.
Right. Now, have you noticed I always show my work, the b divided by 2, and I write the number, whatever it is, and before I square it? These little side notes, do you notice I always have these? If you look at any answer key I make doing this process, you'll find that on every problem I do. I always write that down. Why is it easier? Look at this number. Look what my number was before I squared it. There's my C. There's that number there. Look what it was before I squared it. Here's my number. Here's what it was before I squared it. So when we look at number 4, she already looked at it and went, wait a minute, doesn't divide nice, right? Because my b value is 7, divided by 2 is 7 over 2. And then when we square it, how do you square a fraction? 2. What's square the top, square the bottom? 7 squared is 49. 2 squared is 4. So another reason I don't switch, she said 3.5 and I glared at her. What's 3.5 squared? I'm like, 3.5 times 3.5. Like, I'd have to do a lot of mental math, right? But if I leave 7 over 2, what is that squared? 49 over 4. I can do 7 squared and 2 squared separately. That's really easy that way. So that you would have to add that lovely fraction to both sides. Isn't that pretty? But how does this factor? This is why I like my little side notes. Have you noticed what sign it always is? It's always that sign. So it's just x plus 7 over 2. There's my, that's why I make that little side note. It's sitting right there in front of me. Yeah. No. Well, whatever 49 divided by 4 is. But again, that makes my head hurt to think about that, right? Like, all right. So it'd be 13, that's your b value, divided by 2. Doesn't divide. Squared. There you go. Square them, not just times them by 2. Because otherwise, if you're going to factor this and you're like, all right, I got my parentheses, I know it's x and x, and you're like, oop, they're both minus. And you're like, what's the options for c? And you're like, what do you multiply to get 169 over 4? Right? That makes it awkward. But if I had this little side note written here, I don't got to think about it. It's right there. Okay? Make sense? Yes. That's fine. But no. Nope. I just do it because sometimes your brain gets tired, and I don't want to think about it. All right, so let's go ahead and try the whole process now that we're understanding how just that step is, okay? So, number 6, we're going through step by step. Very first step is to move the c value to the other side. So x squared minus 20x equals, when I move that over, becomes positive 21. Notice I left a gap. Anybody know why I left a gap? I'm going to have to do that b over 2 squared. I'm going to add it to both sides. I've just, by default, started leaving a gap so I can have space to fill it in. All right, so that was step 1. Step 2 is to divide by a. My a value is just 1, right? There's no number here. I don't want to just not talk about it today because Monday, like, that step is going to come into play, okay? So divide by a, I don't have to. Step 3. Step 3 is b over 2 squared. Right, because we don't have an a value here. Monday we will, but sometimes they get real nasty when we do that, so we're going to save that. Again, well, that's what we're going to say that for Monday, not a Friday. So, nothing. Okay. So my b value is 20 divided by 2, and then we square it, which is 100. So that is the number we add to both sides. Even if I make that negative, and that's negative, what's negative 10 times negative 10? It's positive 100. Well, if nothing else, read your steps. What does it say? It says add b over 2 squared to both sides. So it's always going to be adding, because when you square a negative, it's positive. Yeah. Because I have to keep my equation balanced. You're the one who told me to keep it balanced. We were just practicing the process. Yep. So guys, yeah, you have to make sure that you are both sides. And that's a big thing. A lot of students don't do it on the other side, and then your equation's not balanced and it's not going to work. All right. So what's the next step say? It says to factor. It should factor as something perfect. What always goes here? X. What's my sign? Minus. And my number in my little side note? It's 10. Right? Same thing I'd ask you, well, what do you multiply to get 100? It'd be the 10 and 10 that makes 20. 21 plus 100? And now this is what we did yesterday. Take the square root. So x minus 10 equals, thank you, plus or minus 11. Again, for those of you that weren't here, if I take the square root, the plus minus attaches to it. Okay? And then we have to get x by itself. So 10 plus or minus 11. Are those like terms? Yeah. Because 10 plus 11 is 21, and 10 minus 11 is negative 1. So those are my two answers. Now, real quick, I want you to see what just happened. For this problem, this original problem, don't write this down, I just want you to see it though. This original problem would have factored. So if I had factored this from the start, I just want you to see you get the same answer. Right? If I factored it, the original problem, the last one was negative, so 1 plus, 1 minus, would be x and x. 1 and 21 or 3 and 7? 1 and 21. So the 21 is here and the 1 is here. So if I would set that equal to 0 and solve this, x would equal negative 1 and x would equal 21. But now, does every problem factor? No. But I did want you to see, if you factor it, it does work. So if you have a choice, what's faster? Factoring is faster. But if it doesn't factor, we need another option. So that's why we have this process. It's another option in case it doesn't. Who said they have a question? Yes. Oh, I just did 10 minus 11. 10 plus 11, and then 10 minus 11. Yeah, now if one of them has like a radical or an I on it, then I can't put them together.
Are you going to let us know which one we're going to use, or are you just going to let us figure out which one we're going to use?
Both. His question was, on the test, will I let you choose which method, or will I tell you what method? You have like a 5-page test. Page 1, solve by factoring. Page 2, solve by square root method. Solve by completing the square, solve by quadratic formula, and your choice.
Well, our test is pretty strict. How much quadratic formula?
Yeah,
What is on this?
it's a little ways out still.
The next
Yeah.
one?
No.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so you like a week and a half out still.
yeah.
You got time. All right, let's take a look at number 7. So let's go through our steps again. Let's get a couple under us before we run out of time today. So subtract 4. Step 1 is to move the c value. So x squared minus 12x, I leave a little gap, equals negative 4. All right, let's go nice and slow, okay? So that was step 1. Do I have to do step 2 today? No, I don't have, my a value is 1, right? Now what I'm talking about is like next week there might be like a 2 sitting here. We'd have to divide that 2 out, okay, to get the x by itself. But today, that's a lot for today. We're going to wait on that one. All right, so my next step is your b over 2 squared. My b value is it's negative 12 divided by 2. It's negative 6 squared, a positive 36. So we will add 36 to both sides. Again, if I've done something that you're not sure on, please stop me and ask me, okay? You okay? Yes.
So when you do the negative 12 over 2,
Mm-hmm.
you just divide out and you get the number.
Yep. Yep. If it doesn't divide, then either simplify it or just leave it as a fraction. Yep. Okay. Ready? So I did this whole process. What's the whole point of this? What's this method called? Completing the square. I did the whole thing. The reason I do this is so that it becomes something squared. So how does it factor? X minus 6. It's x minus 6. I love my side notes. It gives me all the answers. Equals 32. Good. Question? Next step is to just finish solving, which is what we did yesterday. Square root of both sides. Plus or minus. Yes. It'd be 4 radical 2. If you do your factor tree. I'm going to probably stop doing all those factor trees because they drive me crazy.
Negative 4 plus 2.
How do they what, hon?
You do negative 4.
In my mind, I know that it's 16 and 2. What's the square root of 16? Yeah, no, you're fine. That's I do them in my head. But that's how I do them in my head, you guys. I know what perfect squares go into them, so I can just take the square root. So that's how I start doing those. Maybe hopefully some of you pick that up. It's way faster. All right, and then move to get x by itself. That becomes positive 6 plus or minus 4 radical 2. Can I keep going like I did on this problem? Why not? Good. These were just numbers I can add and subtract together. That one's got a radical, which makes it not a like term. So this is as far as this one can go. We'll talk about that in a minute. What? I know we got like 10 minutes. Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. All right, guys, since we're running short on time, let's skip 8, let's go to 9, because it's one that doesn't, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. It looks really pretty to start. Yeah. Right? You should love it. All right, good. So step 1 is to move the C value. Well, one step at a time. Everyone will find out why it's not pretty in just a second. So step 1 was move my C value. Step 2 is divide by A, which we'll worry about that on Monday. Step 3 is the B over 2 squared. All right, what's my B value? Divided by 2. Everyone now see why it's not pretty? I just keep it like that because it doesn't divide. Perfect. When you square it, square top, square bottom. Okay, so 81 over 4. And again, both sides. You got to balance that equation. Okay, so once we do that, your next step is to factor, which is the whole reason we do this, right? I'm completing the square. How does it factor? There's the answer, sitting on my board right there. Okay, how about the other side? Everybody have a calculator in front of them? Type it in. Type it in. Don't make it harder on yourself than it has to be. Negative 12 plus 81 over 4. Yeah, guys, in real life, things don't come out pretty, so might as well get used to it. What is it? 33 over 4? Switch it. Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. So when she typed it in, she got the mixed number version. How hard is it to take the square root of a mixed number? Yeah, because we do top and bottom, right? So we don't want mixed numbers. If you don't know how to switch it, come see me at the end of class. I will show you how your calculator works to switch that to improper. All right, we got a couple up here. Let me see real quick. Okay, so like you, if you have negative 12 plus 81 ABC 4, right? You get 8 1/4. If you just hit the second button and then your fraction button, that ABC, and hit enter, it'll flip it for you. Yeah, second ABC, hit enter, it'll flip it for you. Okay, other questions to how we got to right here? All right, so then your next step, we're solving. This is what we did yesterday. And again, that's why it needs to be improper, so that I can actually take the square root of top and bottom separately. So we have x plus 9 over 2 equals plus or minus square root of 33. If I do a factor tree, 3 and 11, so nothing there. So radical 33. Square root of 4 is 2. Don't rationalize first, simplify first, because I don't need to rationalize. Right, it's perfect like that. Did you solve for x? No, I still got to solve for x. Oh, it's not hard, you're just moving something. So this 9 over 2 becomes negative 9 over 2, plus or minus radical 33 over 2. Are those like terms? One's got a radical, one doesn't. Stop there. It was a positive 9 over 2, so I had to subtract it to move it to the other side. I know. All right. Do we have our steps written down? Okay. So for this weekend, I'm going to give you some to practice. Not a ton, but I want you to practice some. But read your steps, one step at a time. Okay?